Battle of Cartagena de Indias, the Spanish half-man who stopped Cartagena from becoming British. Between 1739 and 1748, two European powers clashed over the domination of Central American trade. Although the official name of the event is War of the Seat, it is usually called the War of Jenkins Ear in Great Britain, a name that we will explain shortly. The Battle of Cartagena de Indias was an extremely decisive episode in the course of the war. How did a simple battle turn into a nightmare? Join us to find out. Background of the war. To put the war into context, it is necessary to briefly summarise the scenario. The Spanish not only controlled most of the Central American lands, but had dominated the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico almost in their entirety, which further severed the political ties between Spain and Great Britain. For this reason, the English merchantmen smuggled constantly within the Spanish domain, in addition to attacking any ports whose vigilance was light. These small conquests were brief, since the Spanish Navy quickly recovered each post. It was precisely in this scenario that the episode that unleashed the war took place. In 1738, a British smuggler captain named Robert Jenkins was captured by the Spanish off the coast of Florida. Juan Leon Fandino, a captain in the Spanish Navy, cut off one of Jenkins's ears for two reasons: by way of punishment and by way of intimidation, as he supposedly sent a message to the British king through Jenkins. Upon returning to Britain, Jenkins gave the message that Fandino supposedly sent to the English: cut off the king's ear if he dared to smuggle into Spanish territory. It is usually determined that this event started the War of the Seat, a war that is also known in Great Britain as the War of Jenkins Ear. Beginning of the war. In November 1739, Admiral Edward Vernon commanded a successful and devastating attack on Portobello, Panama. Vernon deployed 6 ships to attack a square defended by only 700 men, so the victory was resounding. A curious fact about this event is that it is commonly believed that it led to two things: the creation of the famous hymn called Rule Britannia, and that a street in London is named Portobello Road. Simultaneously, Admiral George Anson was carrying out a sort of diversionary manoeuvre as he lightly harassed the colonies in the South Pacific. Anson's objective was to join forces with the other English ships to cut communications between the Viceroyalty of New Granada and the Viceroyalty of New Spain. Due to the triumph obtained, Vernon and his crew experienced a growth in their morale and in their immediate aspirations, so the decisive blow began to be planned. After assembling a formidable fleet of 186 ships with 27,600 men on board, Vernon marched towards Cartagena de Indias, the most important city in the Caribbean, since this was where all the merchandise from the trade between Spain and India was concentrated, in addition to storing the treasures and minerals extracted from Bolivia and Peru. Spanish defense. Sebastian de Eslava, the Viceroy of the Viceroyalty of New Granada, learned of the British plan, so he took action. Since he did not have a military governor, he decided to take charge of commanding the defense himself. Blas De Lezo, a decorated admiral of the Spanish Navy, was Sebastian de Eslava's right-hand man. The Spaniards had only 3,600 men at their disposal for this battle, distributed in 6 ships. Tension between Vernon and Lezo. Vernon and Lezo corresponded in a threatening tone between November and January 1739. Vernon let Lezo know that after conquering Portobello, he had taken an enormous number of prisoners, but that his treatment of them was worthy of imitation. Lezo replied forcefully to this, telling him that things would have had a very different outcome if he had been there. The letter served as a declaration of war, as a rivalry was evidently generated between the two. Beginning of the battle. The battle is detailed with brilliant accuracy thanks to Tobias Smollett, a Scottish novelist who participated in the battle, serving as a doctor. The imposing British fleet made its appearance before the Spanish on March 13, 1741, before landing in the harbour. The British overpowered the surrounding fortresses, which further intimidated the Spaniards. The numerical difference was abysmal, in theory. The British should have won easily, but Admiral Lezo used every resource at hand to plan an impenetrable defence. After overcoming almost all of the fortresses, there was only one step that separated the British from their objective: overcoming the fortress of Boca Grande. To impede the British advance, the Spanish destroyed 4 ships capable of obstructing the narrow channel of the bay, although this was not supported by Admiral Lezo, who was sure that the British would overcome this obstacle without effort. Finally, this was just as Lezo had thought. The British overcame the blockade without problems. British siege. After this, the British entered the bay in triumph, so the Spaniards abandoned the fortress of Boca Grande and entrenched themselves in the fortress of San Felipe de Barajas. Vernon, wrapped in a climate of good omen and euphoria, sent a letter to England saying that he was victorious in the battle. Believing the victory was only a matter of time, he ordered an incessant bombardment of the castle of San Felipe, in which there were only 600 men under Lezo's command. The British settled in and laid siege to the castle with great intensity, constantly trying to enter. During this time, a decision by Vernon defied the course of the battle. Spanish resistance. Vernon ordered them to attack the rear of the fortress, which meant entering the jungle. The British soldiers followed the order and entered the jungle, but the journey was completely different from what they expected, as hundreds of men became seriously ill and an epidemic of malaria broke out among their ranks. When they finally reached the gates of the fortress, the infantry troops climbed uphill to enter the castle, but a platoon of 300 Spanish soldiers prevented them from advancing. The entrance to the fortress was a narrow ramp, so Lezo used a strategy similar to that of thermoplasty to contain the British advance. 300 Spanish soldiers, armed with bladed weapons, were able to hold off 1,500 infantrymen, which greatly discouraged the British. Vernon began to despair at the unexpected casualties, as he had sent a letter to England claiming victory. After discussions with his generals, he decided to build ladders to overcome the castle walls. Spanish resistance far exceeded Vernon's expectations, and he began to feel that he had lost control of the battle. On the night of April 19th, the British tried to carry out their plan, but they did not count on the astuteness of Blas De Lezo, who had foreseen this move. He ordered them to dig a moat around the wall so that the ladders would not be able to overcome the moat and the wall. The attackers were left unprotected as they climbed the stairs, and the Spaniards riddled them with constant fire. End of the battle. The following morning, on April 20th, the battle was practically over. The Spaniards effectively and successfully resisted the British invasion. The outside of the fortress was full of English corpses, who began to slowly withdraw from the place. The roles were exchanged, and the Spaniards not only resisted inside the castle, but also provoked the British to flee. Finally, the British High Command ordered the withdrawal from the place. The British ranks had suffered so many casualties that they had to burn 5 ships for lack of crew, as they couldn't afford to leave those ships to the Spaniards. While they were retreating from the place, the ships did not stop firing their cannons against the fortress of San Felipe. This battle brought as a consequence the dominion of the Spanish Empire over America for several more years, and consequently, the dispute with the rest of the colonizing countries was prolonged. Indirectly, it caused great problems for the British, since the Spanish dominion over these territories allowed Bernardo de Galvez to play a decisive role in the War of Independence of the United States. Before you go, we remind you that if you liked the video, it would help us a lot if you subscribe to the channel to continue growing little by little and bring much more content. Now, without further ado, we say goodbye.